if someone were to ask me, oh, what can I do? I'd love to start a roastery. I would say, well, you need a few million euros. We all had that luxury of 2 to 3 to 4 years where we didn't have a lot of pressure.
Welcome back to the 5THWAVE podcast. I'm Jeffrey Young, editor-in-chief of coffee business magazine 5THWAVE. This week, we catch up with Kris Schackman, co-founder of 5elephant in Berlin, Germany. We learn about Kris's early journey from the film industry into coffee, the evolution of the German specialty coffee market over the past decade, and the key decisions and secrets to success that shaped the creation of one of the most respected specialty cafes and roasteries in Europe. Kris also shares his belief that a great deal of his firm's scaled success originates from his pioneering entry into such a nascent market, giving him and only a handful of others a clear first mover advantage. Great. Well, welcome to 5THWAVE. Welcome, Kris.
Thank you, Jeffrey. How are you?
Excellent. Yeah, so good to catch up. To start off, I wonder if you could tell us about your career, how you got first started in coffee. So for me, when coffee, I would say, it really goes way back to when I first got into coffee. This was when a lot of the, my first coffee was, I guess, in 1994. I was in university in Western Massachusetts, and I wasn't working in coffee then, but I got very enamored by this idea of the local roastery. So you have, in New England, and it's kind of an American thing, and not that it doesn't happen in other parts of the world, but a lot of communities had their own small roasteries in them. And for me, this kind of romantic idea of a general store that has small bins of coffee in them, and later on I moved to New York, and there were, of course, a lot of roasteries that were just opening then in 2003, 2004. And I wasn't working in coffee then, but it was always in my mind that this was something that I might want to do. So I was working in film and in media back then, working on Hollywood films in New York. And, it's what I had studied in school. So coffee for me back then was also really a big part of my life. You of course start your work in film getting people coffee. So this is something, to have coffee in your blood, to be working long hours, to have this cup that's in your hand. It was something always very comforting for me. So coming from, the first roastery I actually used to buy coffee from in the mid-90s was Scott Rao's first foray into coffee. So this was his first roastery that he started his career in coffee as well in Amherst, Massachusetts. So I knew that there was something to this, and this was a comforting feeling for me. And when I had moved to Europe, finally, I realized that there wasn't much of that here in Europe. So we didn't have the idea of, I didn't see it anyway at that time, that there was a local roastery in a small neighborhood in Berlin. It turns out there were a couple that were just starting out with very small roasteries. But so when I moved to Berlin, I saw this was something lacking. And, I was working in media. I had built a film and photo studio and decided after 2 years that it wasn't really for me. So I was deciding with my now wife, Sophie, that we would develop a neighborhood cafe that roasted and also had cakes in it. So we would do everything ourselves. We had enough money at the time to not have a large debt, and we decided just to go for it. So we got a small handsaw and some wood from the local lumber yard, and we just with a drill, we essentially built the first 5elephant shop. And the idea from back then, because I had visited the U.S. with Sophie, and we saw these roasteries. I brought her to the old Rao's, which is now, it's not affiliated with Scott for some years now. But I showed her this idea and this concept and this thing that really had been a big part of my life. Also with, Guerrilla Coffee in Brooklyn was even a little bit before 9th Street. We had, or before Cafe Grumpy, like Guerrilla was the first,
cafe that I knew that had this kind of third wave. At least on the East Coast, they were the first company to have a Senesso. They were the first company to roast in the shop and focus on direct trade, which was also something really important. So when I showed Sophie these things, that was back, in 2003, I think they started. And when I brought Sophie back to New York and I was showing her these things, and she was already baking cakes for her friends' cafes in our house, it all just kind of came together that this is something really that we want to put our energy with and give up all of the rest and focus on this thing that we were both really in love with. And so that's really how it started back then. Yeah, it kind of just went it sort of just went from there at that point.
When was that? Was that back in 2009, 2010 that you opened?
Yeah, this was exactly. So I would say that the idea probably first came in 2009. And we really decided in the early or late winter, early spring 2010 that this is something we wanted to do. And we were really lucky, actually. We found a place that was for rent. It was an old furniture storage space next to a bar that we were just with some friends telling them about our idea. And our friend went outside to smoke a cigarette and have a phone call, and he walked two buildings over and he saw this place for rent, and he came back and he said, "Oh, what about this place?" And we went outside afterwards, and it, of course it's in the what we call the armpit of the west of old Berlin. So we have this, we went and we saw it, and I'm thinking, this is horrible. This is 4 stops off of a subway line on a bus and on a left turn down a dead end street in the middle of nowhere. And Sophie says, "This is perfect." And so we both had this idea, completely different ideas, which is a bit how we came together, that we were so far apart with where we're coming from. And so in 2010, we opened the store together and started roasting and baking from the very beginning.
Yeah, I remember my first visit to Berlin. We were launching the European Coffee Symposium in 2011. So I did a little recce tour of Berlin, and your spot was obviously very new. I remember very vividly the cheesecake.
Yes, the cheesecake. I have to say, you guys kind of freaked us out because, here we are, we just started this company and we're brewing. In a good way, Jeffrey. I'm joking, but that was, it's like 11 years ago. I think you came. So when you showed up with a big bus of people, and we were, trying to do some pour overs, and we were, we actually didn't really know what to expect, but it was really great, the people, to see the engagement and the interest for what we were doing. I remember that was actually a big motivational boost for us to say, maybe we're doing something that's interesting.
Yeah, well, it was very early days for Berlin. How has the Berlin coffee scene changed in that time?
Well, you still have, what I call the 3 roasters of Berlin. There's really a lot more. And we started, when we started out, we actually didn't know that any others existed. We knew that there was one company roasting a little bit in Friedrichshain, but we started roasting, and we were almost within the first week or two. We had people coming, baristas coming from the barn, baristas coming from Arkiduk, from Bonanza. And we had, suddenly within some months, actually, the birth of this Berlin coffee community. And we all met a lot more. We used to, in the beginning, the barn was just a multi-roaster cafe. They didn't roast for the first years, but, we had this incredible symbiosis of ideas and different methods of brewing, everyone coming from different places. And I feel that initial spark that we all had back then, it really helped push us all to do better year after year. And so we used to bring our coffee to Ralph's at the barn every Friday. We would cup them with Bonanza. We would go to Bonanza's and do an event. We would have them over at our place. And, we did that a lot more directly as the owners of the business. And, of course, there's, everyone talks. And I think, there is a kind of chatter around, the competition behind our companies. But at the end of the day, I think we all enjoy actually when we catch up and we get to meet each other. And we reminisce a little bit about the old days, or we talk about what we're doing. I would say that how that developed, though, was more in the culture of our baristas. So we have, a lot of our staff, let's say, have maybe a significant other that works at another cafe. And so we're, our teams are extraordinarily connected in a way that I think we need to really be conscious of, because in a good way, that, we should foster this feeling of goodwill. We all, I don't think that any of us think of each other necessarily as competition that you need to put down. Mm-hmm. So it is still a very healthy mentality in a lot of ways. And I think what's happened is that we've all grown our companies to a point that we see a direction that we want to go in or that we're working on, and it doesn't really affect each other. So we're all doing something a little bit different. And of course you have, I just should mention, there's really some great companies. Tres Cabezas, which is now 19 grams, they were here well before we were. So, they're doing some good stuff. You had Father Carpenter started a company called Fjord. And so you have across the river here, Populous. We have really a lot of great companies that are all doing something a little bit different. And I really attribute that to the influx of people, all over the world, the Asian inspiration, the Australian, the culture of American coffee coming here. We had this huge Nordic influence. And on top of it all, this, this history, deep history of filter coffee going back to the early 1900s, where essentially Berlin was where filter coffee was invented.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big, I think Berlin is really a special place for coffee.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, I think it's one of those places that, it's seriously on the map as, you've got to go check out if you're a coffee aficionado, a coffee geek. Yeah, I guess we were fairly early there in doing our symposium there in 2011, but it was already special then. And, I can't wait for my next visit.
Yeah, sure. We'll eat some cheesecake.
Yeah. And in terms of the way that German, or at least Berlin, coffee culture might have changed over that time, what's the general consumer like in specialty coffee venues compared to what it was, over a decade ago? And also, is the general population now really sort of into specialty?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think that's actually, it's the general population that's probably changed the most. So we had, in the beginning, we were lucky because, Germany, especially Berlin, it became a kind of Silicon Alley, they called it. So we had such a large amount of tech startups, a lot of people coming from California, and this was also right around 2010. So we had already a very, I would say more that culture pushed us and encouraged us to say, okay, you're doing something right. Excuse me. So when we got going, we were already, doing this thing. And I would say that the general population in Germany, this was our uphill battle in a lot of ways, because they were, excuse me, one second. Sorry, the general population in Germany was really the area that was a little bit fragmented from what we were doing, because they had this history in the 70s and 80s. There was an influx of very cheap Robusta coffee in these chain supermarkets, and the price dropped out. And so this long history of really enjoying quality filter, some of the best Arabica in the world, was coming to Berlin. We had this very strong opinion already about what we were doing based on this trend that had evolved over the past 20, 30 years from before we opened. So we met a lot of resistance. We had a lot of people that we couldn't engage with, and we couldn't, it took some time before I would say the mass consumer in Germany started coming over and appreciating filter coffee again. For sure they wanted espresso drinks. We always were, in the very beginning, serving, what they call a latte macchiato, which is essentially a single shot of espresso dropped in a 400 or 500 milliliter steamed milk. So we really had, we had a lot of education to do, a lot of work to do to inform consumers about what we were doing and why we were doing it. And to get them also to trust again in the quality of coffee, because it was something that was masked up with milk and with sugar, and this was really something that we indirectly worked against, although some companies worked on it quite directly, banning everything that people normally are used to drinking, and this was difficult actually, because it made our job a little bit harder, because we weren't necessarily saying, no, you can't put sugar and milk in your drinks. But we were trying to guide people a little bit more gently. But a lot of people had this, almost violent resistance against what we were trying to do. And now it caught up with us. We have really big companies ordering our coffee. I would say that a lot of, at least our B2B customers, they're actually not going more for these Italian style coffees. And you have a lot of people, I would say that the 25 to 35, 40-year-old, market group, you have them very informed and engaged around these quality products. And for us, it's a big, we're relieved that we can finally, sell what we enjoy doing to a lot of people.
Amazing. So, original vision for 5 Elephant, was it just going to be a one shop with a community roastery? Did you ever think you would have a bigger business like that?
Well, we from the beginning, absolutely not. So I had come from working in film, as I mentioned. My wife, we both of us were working in media. She comes from Vienna, so in Austria. And, I would say our ambitions were not larger. What was really important for us, and I think actually something that in the end helped us with our success, was that we did it because we wanted to be doing it. We wanted to be making coffee and working with a few key staff and really engaging with these customers that were excited about what we did. We were excited about this, and we didn't really think further in the beginning about that. But very soon we got a lot of interest, of course, and we had this opportunity to get 1 or 2 larger wholesale customers, and it was always, I would say, we grew with the excitement of our growing customer base, and we always saw this as a kind of thrilling opportunity to say, oh, you're excited about this too, and let's move our roastery and get a larger roaster and roast more coffee. And we always saw that as a continuation of this idea of building a community and engaging with customers and supporting these networks of partner producers that we worked with at Origin, which we've done pretty much from the beginning. This was also very important, and it's what motivated our growth. We wouldn't have grown if it weren't for the fact that we were able to do a bit more work where we buy coffee and support our partners more.
What's the sort of scale of business now? What's it grown to from that one little site?
The bones. So we started off with a 5 kilo roaster, which I went to Idaho and I helped with the final walkthrough of it. I was very involved in the machinery, so we got a small 5 kilo roaster. Within a couple of years, we grew to a 25 kilo. So we're roasting right now on a 25 kilo Dietrich, and we have so we're operating a roastery, which is a separate business on its own, and that's also in the same facility as our bakery and our office and our training center. So we call this whole complex our HQ, and then we have 4 cafes now in Berlin. So we
We had 3 going into the, just pre-pandemic, and we opened up our 3rd cafe in December of 2019. And then, our 4th cafe, we actually opened up during the pandemic, and we saw it as actually a great opportunity to become, a dependable customer of our own through a time where, the economy in the world was a little bit rattled. So we really were, the reason why we were growing was actually to more directly access our customers, and in a way that gave us a little bit more security than relying on wholesale partners, which we also do, of course.
Mm. Wow, that's incredible growth. That's really having a big impact on the Berlin coffee scene and making waves abroad as well. Your reputation is super out there. What would you say you owe your success to?
So, that's a great question, because a lot of when I think about if you look at some of the great tech companies, or you can call them great, whether or not they're great or not is not up to me to decide.
Yeah.
But a lot of the reason why companies did really well, computer companies, was because you had a group of people who had a lot of access to, they had a lot of access to the internet, whether or not they were working off of mainframes of much larger institutions. They were able to go there all night and spend all of their time developing what would become this, massive industry. And I think, those people were born between a 3-year period in the 1950s. And when I think about why companies like ours are successful, with relatively, if you look at the ones that I really admire, it's done a lot without any kind of outside investments. And I look at, the time period 2007 to 2010, I would say, was this period where you had a lot of really great roasters that started. So whether it was the Nordic roasters, Tim Wendelboe, or Kopi, Charles and Ann, or you have Coffee Collective with Klaus and Peter and Casper, so Square Mile, all of them started around this time, 2007 to 2010. And when you had, also no access to really put your company out there, this was well before Instagram and TikTok and other modern ways that have become synonymous with how you market your business. We all had time to really develop something that actually was really interesting for consumers, and something that would become a very popular thing to do come 2014, 2015. Suddenly we were doing something already, we were already good at it, and it only accelerated this momentum that we all had because we were already ready for it. And I don't think we're doing something much different than most of the other companies. I just think that we were doing it at the right time, and we were also all shared this, extraordinary passion for what we were doing, and a drive for excellence and innovating and being open-minded, thinking about our environment. And these things are all of I would say, the bedrock principles of what we were all doing, and we did it maybe at the right time. And I wouldn't say more than that. I don't think that there's any huge secret, and I probably wouldn't believe that doing that now would have the same result.
Bit like it's harder to get those Instagram likes compared to...
Yeah, it's harder. Exactly. And it just would require, if someone were to ask me, oh, what can I do? I'd love to start a roastery. I would say, well, you need a few million euros. And, in order to get your name out there, to buy yourself some time, we all had that luxury of 2 to 3 to 4 years where we didn't have a lot of pressure. Market pressure, that is, from competition or having to scale.
And running a business now, 4 outlets, a roastery, a bakery, a lot more complex than those early days. Is it easier or harder?
Well, it's both. So on the one hand, when you have a company that, you have some very different and section departments. So, we have like a bakery head, a roastery head, we have social media marketing, we have sales team, accounts, and, office staff, HR, bookkeeping. I mean, we have all of the kind of normal things that a company with 60 to, 70 staff would have. But the one thing I would say that is different is I've gone from a position of being very hands-on directly with our customers to having to change how I think about leading and managing and working with staff. So I used to have a lot of management experience working in film, but when I came into this position, this was something I had to really learn and grow into. And it's not something, there's so many books about this. You can, watch, workshops on topics like this. But through a lot of trial and error and getting it wrong, it's something that you constantly learn and you work from. And I've actually learned that this challenge and this growth and this learning, that the stuff that I want to be better on is actually the new reason why I get motivated. So my reason behind going to work every day has certainly changed, but I'm actually more, for me, it gives me a lot more satisfaction to be able to work and have a team work well together. And that's what drives me every day. So it's different from, okay, I'm focusing on a customer. I want them to be happy. Now I'm focusing on a team, which then I want to focus with customers so that they can be happy. So it's kind of a one step removed, but I'm getting a lot of, personal satisfaction out of that kind of challenge. And also encouraging staff to do competitions. It's like I don't compete, but I love to encourage staff to do competitions or, do a special project. So I'm in a way living vicariously through them. So I mean that's how it's really changed for me.
And anything you would have changed earlier? Like I wish I would have known that, and I would have had an easier life or a tenfold bigger business, or whatever you would have dreamt of.
I would have sunk all of my money into a proper accounting system, because I mean the tax code in Germany is incredibly complex, and we have as it is in a lot of places in Europe, and we had a lot of challenges in our middle years when we were growing, and really our sales started getting much higher, and we had a lot of things that weren't accounted for correctly because of the tax code. So whether it's the tax percentage or when we have rebates or something like that, and so our system, there actually wasn't a system out there that was built for coffee roasteries to sell coffee on the internet. Especially in Germany. So we tried adapting systems, and I would have, from the very beginning, just built our own system and spent, probably would have been 200,000 euros. But it's not something that you can think of in advance until you go through those years of, okay, we need to make things different. And and aside from that, I think I might have made a little more, I probably would have tried to do what I could to pay staff more. Back then, I think that this was something, how to show staff that you can really appreciate what they're doing. You can say you appreciate something all day, but if they're not growing also in value with the company, and they see the company growing, for whatever reason, even if we don't think we have the money to do it, I believe now that looking back, if we had invested more in that the success would have, the benefit would have come from that investment. And I think there's something really to be said about treating your staff well and trusting them to, that they want the same things that you want, and that, in the long run, they should benefit as much as we do. And that's something we learned from the beginning, because it was a very fun time. Everyone was getting into coffee, and it wasn't, for a lot of people, it wasn't about money. It was about this new idea, and we didn't really know how to scale a coffee business. So, you learn along the way, and you make mistakes, and, it's something that
I'm very proud of our team now. We have a really great COO who's also very devoted and passionate about making sure that our team also shares, is able to take part in the kind of growth that we have. But, of course, the last 2 years have been a bit stalled, I would say, for a lot of companies.
Okay, let's talk about those last 2 years. This COVID hit us in, really it was the big moment was March 2020.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. What was going on in your business at that time, and how did you react, and how did you get through it?
So we had actually, we had grown to a point where we were operating a lot of remote barista bars. So we have some concepts where, for very large corporations where we'll build out barista bars and we operate them with our own staff in their offices for certain buildings with 500 or 1,000 staff members working in a building. And so going into 2020, we were operating around, 10 of these units around Germany and France. We had a big operation in Paris. And then, when COVID came, of course, all of this stopped. And, that part of our business, it was around a third of our business doing, our wholesale business to big office companies doing, and anywhere from 20 to 100 kilos in a week. These kind of customers overnight just stopped. And, it really gave us a bit of an existential feeling that we needed to figure out, okay, what are we about? And this is where, we kind of pulled back a little bit. We all moved to doing window service. And this was a little bit of a relief for our company, actually, because we were able to keep our teams relatively safe, sell through the window, and at the same time, we were able to keep our staffing costs down. The government here in Germany has an old instrument that they used called Kurzarbeit. It's like short-time work. So they tried to retool that for this pandemic. It was essentially an instrument from the government to be able to support large companies that do manufacturing, to be able to put their staff on a kind of short-time work. So the government comes in if there's a supply chain delay, and they pay those staff as a kind of unemployment, but they use the employers to administer everything. So for the government, it's a huge, it's a big incentive for them because they don't have to have a lot of unemployment claims, and they put it on the company then to organize these things. And so what was interesting about Germany was that not only did we have this pandemic, but we also had to learn about all of these very complicated structures. And it was a little bit difficult. Staff would get paid a little bit less, but juggling that administration of how this works and how our company is actually going to work and how do we get through this. This was, more than a full-time job. We were, spending 100 hours a week trying to figure this stuff out. And after a few months, when we got into the summer and our doors and windows opened up again, it became a little bit better. But most companies in Germany, I would say, are still on some kind of support. And they've extended it now another 3 months. And what's really strange and bizarre is that as we went through 2020 and, the winter was this other lockdown. But when we came into the spring of 2021, we experienced a massive growth in our store sales. So we started, it was kind of like on, off, and and then it was suddenly on. And it was not only on, but we did our highest retail sales in our company's history in that summer. And going into August, September, October were our busiest retail months ever. So we're extremely optimistic that, when this transitions into an endemic, which is what they think will happen relatively soon, that I do think that the customers, they're all waiting and they're ready, and they're there. We see, the people that still want a great coffee at their local coffee shop.
Great. So what's next for 5
Well, I mean, I was thinking about this idea. I mean, we're a little bit on hold at the moment because we're still trying to get through this winter and keep our team strong. I would say that the thing that we're the most focused on is shoring up our foundation. So to make sure that our teams are really an extension of the ideas of why we want to, be in business. And then until we really have a full, a understanding with all of our teams, and actually we've gotten there a while ago, but the pandemic, I would say, keeps everything simmering a little bit. But I think we're looking to the future, and we want to, just have a strong team. I'm a little bit debating about this idea about growth. I know this is a big topic for a lot of your listeners, probably. And there's always this idea that, okay, coffee companies, they're there for putting a lot of money in, growing them, making a lot of stores, earning a lot of money. And unless I really feel strongly that our why around the reasons for doing that are there, I'm not, we're not going to be pushing our company forward. So this is actually the big thing we work on. We're developing a school. We actually have been building a school in Kenya for the last years. We have already a grade 1 to 3 with 2 preschool classes. And this is something we're doing on our own with a local farmer that, we work with in Kenya. So supporting ideas about this, trying to get behind, our team that they can share that we want to create value at origin is one of our big reasons for why we work. Pushing that, seeing how much we can actually do on that way is something that's inspiring for us all. And we do this in Brazil with clean water projects. We're supporting a farm in El Salvador also that's working on a lot of environmentally conscious, things about regenerative agriculture. And I think for me, if a company is not focused on saving this world, then that's our future, really. That's what's next, is that we want to put this all into doing the things that are important for us. And if we can do more of those and more of that in the future, and it can be an extension of these ideas that we hold true, then I'm really, I would want to grow that as large as we could. If we can't do that, we should just, continue how we are, and we're also fine with that. It's funny because my partner Sophie, we talk about this all the time, and she's coming from a kind of socialist-minded, school in Vienna, Russian school, and she's constantly saying, I'm actually fine how we are. Like, why do we need more? So as long as we're doing what we enjoy, it's from the beginning. It's the main reason why we do it.
In light of the devastating events in Ukraine, before releasing this episode, we decided to catch up with Kris again to understand how this tragic situation is impacting his operations and his own business decision-making.
Well, thanks for joining us here again, Kris. Given that you're based largely in East Berlin, and if we think back some 33 years ago, the fall of the Berlin Wall and everything that represented, and today's world seems a bit surreal with the devastating events in Ukraine at the moment. I'm just wondering what impact you're feeling there.
Then I had known, living in the United States and growing up in the U.S., that you definitely felt the legacy of war, which is still in the society and in the culture here. And so what that represented, it manifested its way in almost an immediate reaction to support with donations, with organizing together. I think within the first day we had most organizations were creating
runs to the border of Poland and Ukraine. It's only, I think, an 8 or 9 hour drive. So it's a very real thing that you can do to help. And people were at first organizing clothes because it's still, winter here. And then, the immediate need for more serious things like medical supplies, pharmaceutical supplies, diapers, sanitary supplies for people coming over who were essentially just, as everyone sees on the news, leaving with their suitcases. It's an enormous amount of things that people needed. So at least in the first week, there was a massive push to do some, donations and bring what we could. We were helping to organize, our daughter's school had a few trucks that went. So every morning we would bring something for that. And then I think, I think that the sensitive subject here, which is the subject of, in general, of, refugees. And in general, this has been a very sensitive and hot political topic here in Europe and Germany, particularly. I think they brought in the war in Syria already in the last years, something around 1 million refugees into Germany. And if you look at other countries, this was limited to around 50,000. If you look at Great Britain or Sweden, I know brought in a lot, but Germany by far had already absorbed really a huge amount of refugees. So I think this is actually a good thing because they have the ability to process a lot of people. There's a real need to keep our focus on the humanity of this and to make sure. And in a way, Germany's reaction for the Syrian refugees was an enormous success here in Germany, because they were able to assimilate and get people working in the workforce. And so I can only be, obviously we we reject any kind of war. This is the furthest thing away. Can you believe in the 21st century that this is even a topic? It's a little bit mind-boggling. But I think Europe in general has a certain amount of flexibility to breathe in and out and try to, because of its unique history. It would be a much different situation if, let's say, there was war in Canada for the United States, or war in Ireland, which you did have this. So in a way, I think the UK also knows. It's one of the more recent wars in Europe, but nothing compares to this. This is a massive displacement of people. So,
is there any impact on your business currently and on the operations and how you're obviously thinking about your business?
Ukraine had been positioning itself to be one of the larger manufacturing suppliers in Europe. So already, a lot of companies have been trying to distance themselves from supply chains from China for packaging, for materials, and whatnot. And so the countries that have been picking that up have been Ukraine and Poland to some extent, and another one, not in Europe, being Turkey, that a lot of the consumables, things that we're using day to day. So for sure that will have some kind of an effect. I think the real question here, it's almost as if this is a call to action to perhaps more rapidly accelerate the push to climate change and the push to be more independent, energy independent, and all of the things that we really want to do. This is in some way hopefully going to accelerate this. And we had a few customers in Ukraine and Kiev, and we, not so much recently, but there is, this is a cosmopolitan city, very international. It's a city that has an extraordinary history of fine cuisine, fine dining, some great roasters that are working there.
some really good, upper end specialty coffee shops. So we had been working with a few of them and quite high volume as well. And of course, all of these places, they're silent now. It's very difficult to hear much and hear any word from them. We have a lot of customers in Poland, so a lot of these and vendors as well. A lot of these companies are already a bit preoccupied with what's going on and doing what they can to support the effort. And I think from a business perspective, it's very important that we can help to share some of this burden, as we do also with the Syrian refugees that we've had. I think it's important to have an equal balance with how we support and how we how we accept people who are fleeing from any kind of war or conflict. That this is really the human side of it, to build systems that can be supportive of this. So this is the approach that we're taking. I mean, we're not a humanitarian company. We're not a nonprofit organization. Although I think we need to see how it progresses in the next weeks. Yeah, this is a new time we're living in.
Kris, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us here today. We wish you and, of course, the people of Ukraine and everyone else affected just a safe and secure immediate future.
Thank you. Thanks for chatting about it.
And that's all for this week's 5th Wave podcast. Please subscribe to 5th Wave wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd really appreciate a good rating if you enjoyed this show. Follow us on Instagram, 5th Wave Coffee. That's the number 5 followed by THWAVE Coffee. And tell us what topics are important to you so we can make the show more relevant to you and to your business. This episode was produced in the one and only Serendipity Studios in glorious Camden, North London. It was produced by myself, Jeffrey Young, Hannah Heath, James Harper of Filter Productions, and sound engineering by Chris Bristow. And this week's song from the Coffee Music Project is Rain Pour Down by Romanian artist IOVA. And until next time, stay safe and stay caffeinated.
To put sugar in your coffee, so how come you keep telling me it's black? Wait, don't cry. I heard the words you told me, but they went over my head. I feel lost, hands tied. I don't know what to do or say, and so each other. So